Hello viewers, welcome to Newsweek South Asia, a show where we will provide you fresh insights into South Asia's geopolitical, strategic and security situation. Let's take a look at the headlines first. India blasts Pakistan for trade and transit terrorism at UNSC. Pakistan's airstrikes kill Afghan children, border tensions soar. And deadly unrest exposes deepening crisis in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. India has launched a sharp diplomatic offensive against Pakistan at the United Nations Security Council, accusing Islamabad of weaponizing Afghanistan's geographic dependence through trade restrictions while simultaneously carrying out military actions that have inflicted civilian casualties. New Delhi described the policy as trade and transit terrorism, condemned cross-border airstrikes, and urged the international community to hold Pakistan accountable for actions that undermine Afghanistan's stability and economic recovery. A report.
India used the United Nations Security Council platform to mount a strong challenge against Pakistan's Afghanistan policy. During a debate on the situation in Afghanistan, India's permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador Parvataneni Harish, accused Islamabad of exploiting Afghanistan's status as a landlocked country by repeatedly restricting trade and transit access. New Delhi argued that Afghanistan's economic recovery depends heavily on uninterrupted regional connectivity and access to external markets. India maintained that restrictions on natural trade routes violate international commitments designed to protect the interests of landlocked developing nations and place additional pressure on an already fragile Afghan economy.
This blatant Pakistani violation of WTO norms and of the UN Charter and international law should be condemned by the global community. Madam President, the Secretary General's report had noted the dire humanitarian concerns and the rising implications for Afghanistan due to unprecedented scale and pace of forced and involuntary returns under adverse circumstances. This needs the world's attention and necessitates more efforts towards addressing food security, healthcare, water security, and other shelter challenges.
India's criticism extended beyond economic issues to Pakistan's military actions inside Afghan territory. Harish cited findings from the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, or UNAMA, and accused Pakistan of carrying out operations that have caused civilian casualties and displacement. India said such actions represent a violation of Afghan sovereignty and international law. According to UNAMA, cross-border violence and airstrikes have continued to inflict civilian harm, prompting repeated UN calls for restraint and accountability. The issue gained further attention earlier this year when UNAMA reported that Pakistani strikes in eastern Afghanistan killed at least 13 civilians, including school children, and injured several others. These strikes intensified tensions between Kabul and Islamabad and drew criticism over their humanitarian impact.
Pakistan's campaign of military airstrikes against Afghanistan is causing huge civilian casualties and sufferings to the Afghan people. We reiterate Secretary General's deep concern at civilian casualties caused by airstrikes, cross-border firing, and targeted killings as detailed in UNAMA reports. We support the Secretary General's call urging compliance with obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law, and ensuring protection of civilians.
The criticism follows months of escalating tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan. In February, UN officials reported civilian deaths following Pakistani strikes in Afghanistan, while subsequent cross-border confrontations further destabilized the region. New Delhi described the label as a deliberate attempt to shift attention away from Islamabad's domestic security failures and accused Pakistani institutions of spreading misinformation.
No faith, no law, and no morality can justify these actions. Let me reiterate. Dressing up a massacre as a military operation does not absolve the perpetrator. Killing, maiming, and orphaning civilians is not counter-terrorism. Espousing high principles of international law and Islamic solidarity while mercilessly carrying out airstrikes during the holy month of Ramadan is a perfect example of hypocrisy.
India concluded by urging the international community to adopt policies that genuinely benefit the Afghan people, arguing that sanctions and punitive measures alone have delivered diminishing returns. New Delhi called for greater engagement with all stakeholders and reaffirmed support for Afghanistan's stability through humanitarian assistance, connectivity, and economic cooperation.
Pakistan's military has once again come under scrutiny after launching fresh airstrikes inside Afghanistan. Attacks that Afghan authorities say killed 13 civilians, including 11 children. These strikes have reignited tensions between Kabul and Islamabad, shattered a fragile period of calm, and renewed accusations that Pakistan's security establishment continues to pursue military solutions at the cost of civilian lives. As Afghanistan mourns another deadly cross-border attack, international concern is growing over the worsening humanitarian fallout. A report.
The latest Pakistani airstrikes targeted Afghanistan's eastern provinces of Kunar, Khost and Paktika. According to the Afghan Taliban government, at least 13 civilians were killed, among them 11 children, while another 14 women and children were injured after residential homes were struck during the overnight bombardment. The United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan has confirmed the civilian death toll, reporting that most of the victims were women and children. Pakistan, however, claims these strikes were calibrated operations against militant hideouts and says 26 terrorists were killed. Yet on the ground, Afghan officials say the victims were ordinary civilians caught in another episode of cross-border violence.
دیش ملتانه د پیښه وشوه دا غریبه کورنۍ وه دغه هیڅ شي کې ګوته نه دی والی نه چې کړي دي نه د چا سره تعلقات وي دا بغیر د مظلوم ولس و دا مظلومه کورنۍ وه دغه نړیوالې ټولنه نه مې غوښتنه دا ده چې آیا موږ څه بد کړي دي موږ څه ګناه کړی دی.
The strikes mark a major escalation in a conflict that has already claimed hundreds of lives this year. Relations between Afghanistan and Pakistan have steadily deteriorated amid Islamabad's repeated accusations that Kabul is harboring anti-Pakistan militants. Afghan authorities have consistently rejected those allegations, insisting that Afghan territory is not being used against any neighboring country. Despite multiple diplomatic efforts and ceasefire arrangements, violence along the 2,600-kilometer border has continued to intensify. The latest attack comes only months after one of the deadliest incidents in Afghanistan's recent history. In March, a Pakistani airstrike reportedly hit the Omid Drug Rehabilitation Hospital in Kabul, causing mass casualties. Afghan authorities and UN assessments describe the attack as catastrophic, raising serious concerns about the protection of civilians and the use of force across the border. The recurring pattern has fueled accusations that Pakistan's military operations are exacting a heavy humanitarian price on Afghan civilians.
هر قانون خلاف عمل و چې د پاکستان فوزي رژیم تر سره کا او دغه په دغه رقم ډېرې پیښې دوی تر سره کړي دي چې عام هیوادوال یې په هرځي کې شهیدون کړي دي لکه د نن وکسه ټول په دې کې ډېر په نفر چې دي زنانه او ماشومان دي شهیدان دي او زخمیان یې دغسې زنانه او ماشومان دي.
Afghanistan has condemned these strikes as a violence of its sovereignty and territorial integrity, while the United Nations has called for restraint, civilian protection, and renewed dialogue. With border crossing disrupted, humanitarian access affected, and mistrust deepening between the two neighbors, fears are growing that the conflict could push the region into another dangerous phase of instability. For many Afghans living near the frontier, the latest airstrikes are a grim reminder that civilians continue to bear the heaviest burden of an unresolved conflict.
Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir is witnessing one of its most serious waves of unrest in recent years. Deadly clashes between protesters and security forces have left multiple people dead, triggering a region-wide shutdown, mass arrests, and allegations of human rights abuses. As Islamabad intensifies its crackdown on dissent, international concern is growing over the deteriorating situation in the disputed territory and the treatment of civilians demanding political and economic rights.
Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir has been rocked by deadly violence after security forces allegedly opened fire during anti-government protests in Rawalakot, leaving several people dead and dozens injured. The unrest was triggered by growing public anger over long-standing political grievances and a controversial decision to retain 12 reserved assembly seats for refugees living outside the territory ahead of elections scheduled for July. The situation escalated after authorities banned the Joint Awami Action Committee or JAAC, a civil society alliance that has spearheaded protests over governance, economic hardship and political representation. Reports also indicate internet restrictions and mass detentions amid growing fears of further violence. Amnesty International has expressed concern over the deteriorating human rights situation in the territory. The violence has sparked widespread outrage across POJK, prompting protest groups to call for a region-wide shutdown. Cities and towns including the capital Muzaffarabad came to a standstill as markets, businesses and transport services remained shut in support of the strike. The shutdown reflected growing frustration among residents who accused Islamabad of suppressing local voices while refusing to address long-standing demands for political rights and greater accountability. Protest leaders argued that the heavy deployment of police and paramilitary forces has only deepened public anger and widened the trust deficit between local communities and the authorities.
जॉइंट एक्शन कमेटी के कॉल पर पूरे आज़ाद कश्मीर की तरह आज़ाद कश्मीर के सबसे बड़े कैपिटल सिटी जो है मुजफ्फराबाद 5.5 लाख आबादी को आज आप देख लीजिए, ये टोटली वीरान है, मुकम्मल सुनसान है। इसकी वजह है कि हर दुकान और हर मार्केट, हर कूचा, हर गली, हर बाजार जो है वो मुकम्मल बंद है। इंसान बिल्कुल नापैद हो चुके हैं, ऐसे लगता है जैसे इस बस्ती में कोई रहता नहीं। ये एक बड़ा मुहज़्ज़ब, पुरअमन, डिसेंट अंदाज का एहतजाज है, कानून के दायरे के अंदर रहते हुए, आइन के दायरे के अंदर रहते हुए एहतजाज है। मुस्तरद कर रहा है हुकूमत के बयानी को कि ये लोग दहशतगर्द हैं, ये लोग पुरअमन हैं। दहशतगर्द जो है वो हुकूमत है जो जबर के ज़रिए, ताकत के ज़रिए इस पुरअमन सदा को दबाने की कोशिश करती है। लेकिन आज आप देख लें, हुकूमत आज़ाद कश्मीर में जबर की ताकत का इस्तेमाल करके मुकम्मल नाकाम हो चुकी है।
As the crackdown intensified, residents continued to call for dialogue instead of force. Many argued that the movement is not directed against Pakistan itself but against decades of perceived political marginalization and denial of rights. The current crisis has its roots in broader grievances that has fueled repeated demonstrations over the past several years, including protests over soaring electricity prices, food inflation, governance failures, and demands for greater local representation.
भाईचारे से आप बात करें, आप बैठे टेबल टॉक करें और पाकिस्तान से बड़े लोगों को लाएं, इनके साथ बात करवाएं। ये लोग पाकिस्तान के खिलाफ तो नहीं है, ये तो किसी फौज के खिलाफ नहीं है, ये अपने हकूक मांग रहे। 70 साल से आपने हमें फुदू लगाया हुआ है, 70 साल से आप हमारे हकूक खा रहे।
India has strongly condemned the killings and accused Pakistan of attempting to divert international attention from what New Delhi described as serious human rights violations in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Addressing reporters, Indian External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Randir Jaiswal said reports of police brutality, deaths and injuries among civilians reflected a disturbing pattern of repression.
We continue to see in this context a pattern of fake news and videos emanating from Pakistan. It is a desperate attempt by Pakistan to cover up its own failings and deflect attention away from its human rights abuses. There are reports of police brutality, which you would have seen. There are several reports in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir in which several people have been killed. There are several more who have been injured. We hope the international community will hold Pakistan accountable for its misdeeds and its abuses.
For now, Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir remains tense. Streets that were once bustling have fallen silent, while demands for justice, political representation and accountability continue to grow louder. As authorities pursue protest leaders and tighten security measures, the crisis is rapidly evolving into a broader challenge to Islamabad's governance of the territory.
Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir is witnessing one of its most significant political crises in recent years. Deadly clashes, a region-wide shutdown, and the banning of a prominent civil society group have intensified questions about governance, political representation, and human rights in the territory. In this interview with Newsweek South Asia, POJK human rights activist Dr. Amjad Ayub Mirza discusses the roots of the unrest, the public mood on the ground, and why he believes the latest developments have exposed deeper challenges to Pakistan's control over the region. Hello, sir. Welcome to Newsweek South Asia. My first question to you is, we have seen protests in POJK before, but this time the region has witnessed deaths, a complete shutdown, and a ban on a major civil society movement. What makes this crisis difficult? And what exactly triggered the latest unrest in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir?
There were demands, especially the demand was to abolish the 12 refugee seats in the POJK Legislative Assembly. Since those 12 seats are not from POJK, they are the Kashmiri refugees from Jammu and Kashmir who live in various parts of Pakistan, and they never come to Kashmir. They have nothing to do with POJK politics or economics or anything that is related to POJK. So these seats are allegedly manipulated by the Pakistan military establishment, and they nominate them, they send them, so they constitute 23% of the electoral college of the Legislative Assembly. Out of 53, they are 12, another 15, 16, and they have got a majority, and that is how Pakistan manipulates the Legislative Assembly of POJK in order to form whatever government they want to form. So this was a peaceful protest, and they had been promises that these grievances or these demands will be met, but after 90 days of period, still nothing was happening, and the POJK Election Commission announced that on the 27th of July there will be general election in POJK. So they suddenly said that how can you have a general election without addressing the refugee seats issue? And then they announced that on the 9th of June, the same day when the Election Commission said that everybody will start submitting their nomination papers, on the same day they called for a general strike.
The authorities have banned the Joint Awami Action Committee. Why do you think Pakistan chose to ban JAC instead of engaging with it politically?
Well, they don't want to engage because Pakistan is Pakistani occupied Jammu Kashmir is a colony of Pakistan. It is not an equal partner in the Federation of Pakistan. It is not like Indian Jammu Kashmir, which is a part of India and is treated likewise. So this is POJK and Gilgit-Baltistan are both colonies, and colonies are kept to plunder their resources. Colonies are meant to provide them with rare earth minerals, water resources, forest, and human labor. And now at the moment, 20 lakh, 2 million of our youth are abroad doing, these unskilled jobs. But the bulk of foreign exchange that Pakistan is earning is through our Kashmiri diaspora. And so they are exploiting us in every form. So Pakistan, why would Pakistan negotiate with a civil rights movement which is demanding more authority for their local parliament, more rights for their people? Why would they? Because that is against the Pakistan's policy of exploiting the people of POK.
The recent shutdown brought cities and towns across Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir to a standstill. What does such a widespread response reveal about public sentiment in the region?
Public sentiment is this, that yesterday there were speeches made in Rawalakot in which the speakers were saying that from now on we are not going to talk about Pakistan as our brother or Pakistan as our advocate in the international forums. Anybody who does that will be, thrown out of Rawalakot, will be banished, or he or she would be banished from Rawalakot. You cannot carry a Pakistani flag in POJK now. If they see you with Pakistani flag, or if your car has got a Pakistani sticker, like a flag sticker, they will stop you and they will either take it off or they will damage your car. Or if you have a flag fluttering at the back of your motorbike, they will stop you. So nobody can dare take a Pakistani flag and go in public anymore. So this is the public sentiment, and people are talking about Azadi.
Pakistan frequently presents itself as a defender of Kashmiri rights internationally. How do you see recent events in POJK affect that narrative?
Well, Pakistan is a usurper of Kashmiri rights. Pakistan attacked on the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistan, has done so much for keeping us backward that if I start mentioning the list of acts that they have done, especially the Act of 1974, which was the POJK Assembly Constitution was prepared in Pakistan and then sent to the Assembly that, now you can vote on this. And then they voted and it became Act 74, and it has no powers. There is a Kashmir Council on top of the Legislative Assembly that is controlling the affairs of POJK. All the main people who are in big positions like IG, police, like Accountant General, like the Chief Secretary, like other major, institutions are Punjabis. They are not Kashmiris. And so there is no human right, respect for human rights in POJK or Gilgit-Baltistan for that matter.
Thank you so much for giving us your time, sir. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We'll be back next week with more news, views, and analysis from the subcontinent. Meanwhile, do keep writing to us at nwsa@anin.com. This is Shivangi Mishra signing off on behalf of the entire team of Newsweek South Asia. Goodbye and take care.